Betrayed by her toxic family, she vowed revenge with the help of her Mafia boss husband. They tried to kill their own daughter in a staged car crash to steal her inheritance. She should have died that night, but she woke up guarded by armed men and a dangerous stranger calling her his wife. She doesn't remember marrying a Mafia boss. Her family swore it never happened, but the proof is real, and so is the threat hunting her. Now she's trapped in his violent world where loyalty is paid in blood, and he's ruthless to everyone except her. As secrets surface and betrayals explode, she learns the crash wasn't the first attempt on her life, and the people who raised her are desperate to finish the job. With her mind and his empire, she plans revenge that will destroy them forever. But can she trust a man who rules the underworld? Or is this marriage her only chance to survive and strike back? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The crystal glasses clinked delicately against fine china as servants cleared the remains of the third course. Alara Vance sat perfectly straight in her high-backed chair, maintaining the polished composure expected of a Vance heir. The dining room's opulent chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany table, highlighting the tension lines around her father's mouth as he studied her over his wineglass. "Family is everything, Alara." Marcus Vance's voice carried the weight of authority wrapped in velvet. But even blood ties require careful consideration these days. Alara took a measured sip of her Bordeaux, letting the rich liquid coat her tongue as she processed the warning beneath his words. The massive dining room suddenly felt suffocating, despite its soaring ceiling and carefully curated artwork. Every meal in this house was a chess match, each casual comment loaded with hidden meaning. "Of course, father." She kept her tone neutral, though her fingers tightened imperceptibly around the delicate stem of her glass. Trust is earned, not inherited. A ghost of approval flickered across his weathered features. At 48, Marcus Vance commanded respect, not just through his position as head of the family's investment firm, but through the calculated intelligence that had built their empire, the same intelligence that now watched her with hawkish intensity. "You've learned well," he murmured, dabbing his lips with a crisp linen napkin. "Remember that wisdom, especially now." The subtle emphasis on now made her pulse quicken, though nothing showed on her carefully composed face. Alara had spent years perfecting this mask of dutiful daughter while quietly gathering evidence of the family's true business dealings. The flash drive secured in her apartment's safe grew heavier with each passing day. "If you'll excuse me," she said, rising with fluid grace, "I have some reports to review before tomorrow's meeting." Her mother's perfectly arranged features creased with disapproval. "In this weather? The storm's getting worse by the minute." As if to emphasize the point, thunder rolled overhead, rattling the crystal drops of the chandelier. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows with increasing fury. "I'll drive carefully," Alara assured them, accepting the swift kiss her father placed on her cheek. His cologne, expensive and subtle, carried notes of cedar and something darker. Like everything else about Marcus Vance, it was carefully chosen to project power wrapped in refinement. The drive home started as a familiar routine. Her Mercedes purred through the rain-slicked streets of the exclusive hillside neighborhood, wipers working steadily against the downpour. Alara's mind churned over her father's warning, parsing each word for hidden meaning. The family was planning something big enough to merit cautioning his own daughter about trust. The mountain road curved sharply ahead, a treacherous stretch even in good weather. Alara automatically eased off the accelerator, muscle memory from countless trips down the same path. The rain had intensified, reducing visibility to a gray blur punctuated by the rhythmic sweep of her wipers. The first sign something was wrong came when she pressed the brake pedal, approaching the curve. Instead of the expected resistance, it went straight to the floor with no response. Her pulse spiked as she pumped it frantically, but the car maintained its speed. Bright lights suddenly flooded her rearview mirror, momentarily blinding her. A massive black SUV materialized from the darkness, closing the distance with alarming speed. Alara's hands tightened on the wheel as she fought to maintain control, mind racing through options that narrowed with each passing second. The SUV slammed into her rear bumper. The impact jerked her forward against her seatbelt, sending the Mercedes into a dangerous slide on the wet road. Alara countersteered instinctively, but another brutal hit from behind destroyed what little control she had left. Time seemed to slow as her car broke through the guardrail. For a suspended moment, she could see everything with crystal clarity. The way the rain caught the glow of her headlights, the serpentine path of a lightning bolt across the sky, the yawning darkness of the ravine below. Then reality crashed back in with devastating force. The Mercedes tumbled down the steep embankment, each impact sending shocks of pain through her body. Metal screamed as it crumpled, glass exploded inward in a deadly spray. Alara's world became a violent carousel of sky and ground, punctuated by the crush of metal and the sharp tang of gasoline. A massive jolt stopped the car's descent, leaving it precariously balanced on its side. Blood trickled down Alara's temple where her head had struck the window. The airbag hung deflated and useless, dusted with shattered safety glass that glittered like deadly diamonds in the dying headlights. Water was seeping in from somewhere. She could hear it gurgling beneath the tortured groans of stressed metal. The smell of gasoline grew stronger, mixing with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp ozone of short-circuiting electronics. Through the spider-webbed remains of her windshield, Alara could see the SUV's headlights at the top of the ravine. They lingered for a long moment, ensuring their handiwork before disappearing into the storm-dark night. This was no random accident. This was an execution, carefully planned and precisely executed. The realization brought a strange clarity despite her increasing disorientation. Her father's warning hadn't been meant to protect her. It had been a test, one she had apparently failed. Fire flickered in her peripheral vision, small flames licking at the crumpled hood despite the rain. The water was rising faster now, past her knees, while smoke began filling the cabin. Alara tried to move, but pain lanced through her left side, stealing her breath. Her seatbelt had locked, trapping her in place as the car settled deeper into what she now realized must be a flood-swollen creek bed. Her thoughts grew sluggish as smoke and pain clouded her consciousness. The flames were spreading, reflecting off the rising water in a macabre dance. She had always known the risks of gathering evidence against her family, had prepared for the possibility of discovery. But this calculated violence wrapped in plausible deniability, was pure Marcus Vance. The last thing Alara saw before darkness claimed her was another flash of lightning, illuminating the rain in silver sheets. In that brief, brilliant moment, she could have sworn she saw movement on the embankment, a figure making its way down toward the wreck. But consciousness was slipping away too quickly to be certain. Her final coherent thought wasn't of fear or anger, but of grim determination. If she survived this, things would change. She was done playing the obedient daughter, done pretending not to see the corruption that ran bone deep in her family. They had just made their biggest mistake. They had shown their hand too soon. The water reached her chest as awareness faded, and Alara Vance slipped into darkness with the taste of rain and smoke on her tongue, and revenge burning in her heart. Every crackle of the growing flames, every drop of water seeping into the cabin, every tortured groan of metal spoke of meticulous planning gone right. Or wrong, depending on one's perspective. The storm raged on, rain washing away evidence of brake lines carefully cut, of an SUV's deliberate pursuit, of a family's betrayal, wrapped in the illusion of an unfortunate accident. The Mercedes settled deeper into the creek bed, water and fire fighting for dominance over its wreckage. Inside, Alara's unconscious form remained secured by the very safety feature now, threatening to become her prison as smoke continued to fill the cabin and flames crept closer to the fuel tank. The night pressed in, thunder drowning out the approach of any potential help or harm. Nature itself seemed to conspire in the attempted murder, the storm providing perfect cover for the calculated violence that had sent a daughter plummeting toward what should have been certain death. But fate, or perhaps something more deliberate, had other plans for Alara Vance. The figure she'd glimpsed in that final flash of lightning was no hallucination, though that truth would have to wait for consciousness to return. For now, she floated in the dark space between life and death, while rain continued to fall and fire continued to spread, and the night kept its secrets close. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came the steady beeping of medical equipment, then the crisp scent of antiseptic. Alara's eyelids felt heavy as she struggled to open them against harsh fluorescent lighting. Her body ached, particularly her left side, where seatbelt bruising wrapped around her ribs like a painful embrace. White walls came into focus slowly. This wasn't a hospital. The room was too luxurious, with expensive medical equipment and plush furnishings that spoke of private care. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the subtle sheen of what could only be bulletproof glass. Two armed men in dark suits stood near the door, their presence both protective and imprisoning. Their weapons were visible, an intentional display of force. These weren't hospital security. Their stance and vigilance spoke of military training. A doctor in a white coat approached her bed, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Vance, good to see you awake. You're fortunate, no major injuries beyond bruising and a mild concussion. Someone pulled you from the wreck before emergency services arrived." Alara's throat felt raw when she tried to speak. The doctor offered her water through a straw, and she took careful sips before asking, "Where am I?" "This isn't a hospital." "This is a private medical facility," the doctor replied, checking her vital signs. "You're safe here. The team that extracted you brought you directly to us." "Team!" Alara's mind raced despite the lingering fog. The crash rushed back, the SUV, the failing brakes, water rising in the cabin. "Who?" The door opened, silencing her question. The armed men straightened to attention as a tall figure entered the room. Even through her disorientation, Alara registered the immediate shift in atmosphere, how everyone, including the doctor, seemed to hold their breath. The stranger commanded the space without effort, danger wrapped in an expertly tailored black suit. His movements were controlled, predatory grace in human form. But it was his eyes that caught and held her, gray as winter steel, cold and assessing as they fixed on her. "Leave us," he ordered, his voice a low, accented rumble that expected immediate obedience. The doctor hesitated. "Sir, she needs rest." One look from those steel eyes had the medical staff hurrying out, the armed guards following. The door clicked shut with quiet finality. The stranger approached her bed with measured steps. "Hello, wife." That single word hit Alara like another car crash. "What did you just call me?" "Wife," he repeated, as if stating an obvious fact. "Though I understand your confusion given the circumstances." Fury cut through her remaining disorientation. "I don't know who you are, or what game you're playing." "Nikolai Moretti." He said it simply, watching her face for recognition. "And this is no game, Alara." The name meant something. She could feel it tickling at the edges of her memory, but she couldn't place it. "I've never been married, huh?" "You have." Nikolai moved to a nearby table, retrieving a leather portfolio. 5 years ago, to be precise. "That's impossible." But even as she said it, uncertainty crept in. There were gaps in her memories from that time, a period her family referred to only as her difficult phase. He opened the portfolio, removing documents with deliberate care. "Marriage certificate dated June 15th, 5 years ago. Your signature, witnessed, and notarized." He laid it on her lap, then produced photographs. Her, younger but unmistakable, in a white dress. Her beside a younger version of the man before her, both wearing rings. "These are fake," she whispered, but her conviction wavered. The images triggered something like trying to remember a dream upon waking. "Look at your left hand," Nikolai instructed. "Fourth finger." Alara's gaze dropped to her hand. There, barely visible, unless you knew to look for it, was a pale band of scarred tissue, exactly where a wedding ring would sit. "The ring was removed while you were unconscious," he continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "The scar was deliberately irritated to fade it, but some marks can't be erased entirely." Her head spun with implications. "If what you're saying is true, why don't I remember? And why appear now?" "Because your family arranged last night's accident." Nikolai's voice hardened. "They believed you were gathering evidence against them. They were right." Alara's breath caught. She'd been so careful, so meticulous in hiding her investigation. "How do you?" "Because I've been watching, waiting. Your father's organization has been moving against mine for months. When I discovered why, I increased surveillance on you." His expression remained impassive, but something dangerous flickered in those steel eyes. "They chose to eliminate you rather than risk exposure. Their mistake." "My father—" The words felt ashen in her mouth. She'd known, of course, suspected his involvement the moment the SUV appeared, but hearing it confirmed. "Marcus Vance signed your death warrant at that dinner table," Nikolai confirmed. "The warning about blood and trust wasn't meant to protect you." It was his way of saying goodbye. Alara's hands clenched in the expensive sheets. She thought of her father's smile across the dinner table, how he'd kissed her cheek before she left, how he'd known it would be the last time he saw her alive. "Why did they erase my memory of you?" she asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Because our marriage united two powerful families, but not in the way they intended." Nikolai's lip curled slightly. "You were meant to be leverage against me. Instead, we formed an alliance they couldn't control. So they took you, altered your memories, and convinced you none of it had happened." The monitor beside her bed registered her increasing heart rate. "And you just let them?" "No." That single word carried years of cold fury. "I spent 2 years hunting for proof you were alive, another 3 building the network needed to extract you safely when they finally moved against you. I underestimated how quickly they'd act. We barely reached you in time." Alara's analytical mind kicked in despite her emotional turmoil. "The figure I saw on the embankment, before I lost consciousness." "My men, I was monitoring your dinner with your father. When you left alone, we followed." His expression darkened. "We knew they'd make their move soon. We didn't expect them to be quite so bold." She absorbed this, fitting pieces together. "The evidence I gathered. You already have copies." "Yes." "And now that they've shown their hand?" Something almost like approval flickered across his features. "Now we show ours." Alara studied him, this dangerous stranger who claimed to be her husband, who had apparently spent years orchestrating her protection. Everything about him radiated lethal capability and absolute control, yet he stood at a respectful distance from her bed, making no move to touch her or force proximity. "I don't remember you," she said finally. "I don't remember us." "I know." His voice softened fractionally. "The memories may return with time, or they may not. But right now, what matters is keeping you alive while we dismantle everything your father built." "Using my evidence?" "Combined with mine." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. You'll have proof of everything I've told you, including details of how they altered your memories. But time is critical. Your family believes you're dead. That gives us an advantage, but only if we move quickly." The monitor beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Alara felt the weight of the marriage certificate in her lap, saw the ring scar she'd never truly noticed before. She thought of her father's kiss goodbye, of the SUV's headlights in her rearview mirror, of water rising in the cabin while fire spread. She thought of years spent gathering evidence, believing she worked alone, when all along there had been someone else moving pieces on the board, someone who had apparently been her husband before her family stole even that truth from her. The morning sun continued to stream through bulletproof glass, painting patterns on pristine white walls. Armed men guarded the door, and somewhere beyond this room, her family celebrated her death while plotting their next moves. But in here, in this moment, Alara Vance looked at the stranger who called himself her husband and saw not just an ally, but a weapon, one pointed directly at those who had tried to kill her. Sunlight crept across the medical suite's polished floor as Alara watched Nikolai retrieve a sleek laptop from a nearby table. Her body ached from the crash, but her mind raced faster than the pain signals could travel. The morning had become a cascade of revelations, each more devastating than the last. "Your father amended the trust 2 years ago," Nikolai said, turning the screen toward her. "The inheritance transfers only upon confirmation of your death, a clever way to ensure their cleanup would be thorough." Alara scanned the document, her financial analyst's eye catching the careful legal framework. Everything was there: the corporation holdings, the offshore accounts, the real estate portfolio she'd spent years tracking, all of it, contingent on her death certificate. "That's why they needed a body," she said quietly. "The crash wasn't just about silencing me. They needed proof." "Yes." Nikolai's voice carried the weight of contained violence. "The SUV was meant to push you into the ravine, deep water, twisted metal, and enough fire to ensure dental records would be necessary. Clean, professional, except we were waiting." Her fingers traced the edge of the laptop screen. "Show me the rest." He pulled up another file, their marriage certificate, followed by court documents she'd never seen. Judges' signatures, legal declarations, official seals. A systematic erasure of their union, executed through channels that should have been impossible to corrupt. 3 judges, she noted, all handling different aspects of the annulment, all working independently. All dead now. Nikolai's statement wasn't a threat or a boast, just a cold fact. Heart attack, hunting accident, home invasion. Your father is thorough when covering his tracks. The clinical part of her mind appreciated the elegance of it. Multiple judges, separated deaths, nothing to connect them. The human part of her felt sick. "This wasn't the first attempt," she said, reading something in his controlled stance. "No." He pulled up 3 more files. 8 months ago, brake lines cut on your car. You took a taxi that day because of rain. 4 months ago, food poisoning at that charity gala. You left early with a migraine. And 2 weeks ago, the mugger in the parking garage, and 2 weeks ago, the mugger in the parking garage, the one who ran when security approached. Alara remembered each incident. The brake fluid puddle she'd stepped in, thinking someone's car was leaking, the strange taste of her appetizer that she'd attributed to exotic spices. The man, who'd seemed more interested in getting close than stealing her purse. I need to call the police, she said, reaching for her phone on the bedside table. With this evidence already handled. Nikolai's voice carried no judgment as he showed her another screen. Intercepted phone calls, police reports filed and buried, psychiatric evaluations she'd never undergone. They've been laying groundwork for months. As far as official channels are concerned, you're an unstable heiress with a history of paranoid accusations against your family. The crash will be ruled suicide. Tragic, but not unexpected given your mental state. That's impossible, she protested. I have accounts, recordings, documents, all seized in a warrant that doesn't exist, supporting a case that was never filed. He met her gaze steadily. The system you're counting on was compromised long ago. That's why you've been gathering evidence in secret, isn't it? Some part of you knew. She had known. Every encrypted file, every hidden camera, every careful documentation. She'd done it all knowing she couldn't trust official channels. But facing the reality was different from suspecting it. Movement at the door drew her attention. 2 armed men appeared, their weapons visible but not aimed at her. They took positions on either side of the entrance, faces impassive. Are they here to keep me in? She asked, voice tight. They're here to keep others out, Nikolai corrected. You're not a prisoner, Alara, but right now you're also not safe anywhere else. She looked at the guards again, noting their professional stance, their tactical gear, the way they watched the hallway rather than her. Protection, not confinement. But the effect was the same. She was sealed in this fortified medical suite with a man who claimed to be her husband and a truth that stripped away every illusion of safety she'd ever had. My whole life, she said slowly. Every connection, every relationship, every legal protection. It was all compromised from the start? Not all. Nikolai's voice softened fractionally. Our marriage was real. That's why they had to erase it. You weren't just an asset to be controlled anymore. You were becoming something they couldn't predict. The monitor beside her bed kept its steady rhythm as Alara processed this. She thought of her father's many lessons about family loyalty, about knowing her place, about being the perfect corporate heiress, all while he laid the groundwork to kill her. The evidence I gathered, she said finally. How much of it matches yours? Most. He moved closer, but still maintained a careful distance. You found the money laundering through the Singapore shell companies, the weapons shipments hidden in art imports, the missing witnesses from the Richardson case, all the pieces that could destroy them. But not the biggest piece, she realized. Not what they did to me, to us. No, that evidence was harder to obtain. Medical records, specialist consultations, the specific drugs they used to alter your memory, those trails were buried deeper. Alara looked down at her hands, seeing the pale band of skin where a ring had once been. A ring she didn't remember wearing from a marriage she couldn't recall, to a man who now represented her only safe harbor in a world where everything familiar had become lethal. The sun climbed higher outside the bulletproof windows. Somewhere in the city, her family was likely already implementing their contingency plans, realizing she hadn't been found in the wreckage. The police would be handling a missing persons case that would never be solved. And here she sat, in a private medical suite guarded by armed men, facing the reality that her entire life had been built on carefully constructed lies. I need to see it, she said firmly. All of it. Every piece of evidence you have about what they did to me. Nikolai studied her for a long moment, then nodded. It won't be easy to read. Nothing about this is easy. She met his gaze steadily. But if I'm going to trust you, if I'm going to accept that my only safety lies in your world now, I need to understand exactly what they took from me. He moved to a wall safe she hadn't noticed before, his movements precise and controlled. The guards remained at their posts, professional and alert. Outside, the city continued its morning routine, unaware of the seismic shifts occurring in this fortified room. Alara watched him retrieve a thick file, knowing that whatever it contained would shatter the last remnants of her old life. But she'd rather face the brutal truth than live with comfortable lies. She'd spent years gathering evidence against her family, believing she worked alone. Now she knew differently. Her world had contracted to this room, these armed guards, this dangerous man who claimed to be her husband. There was no way out except through the evidence, through the truth, through whatever darkness lay ahead. The file landed softly on her lap. Nikolai stepped back, giving her space to process what she was about to learn. The morning sun cast his shadow long across the floor, a dark line that seemed to separate her past from whatever future awaited. Alara opened the file. The transition from medical suite to fortified estate happened with military precision as dusk settled over the city. 4 armored SUVs formed a protective convoy, with Alara in the central vehicle beside Nikolai. She watched the familiar streets of her life blur past the bulletproof glass, each mile taking her further from everything she'd known. Nikolai's estate sprawled across several acres, surrounded by walls topped with security measures that gleamed in the fading light. The main house rose like a modernist fortress, all clean lines, dark stone, and vast windows that probably cost more than most homes. Guards patrolled the grounds with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated through earpieces. "Welcome home," Nikolai said quietly as they pulled into a covered entrance. Alara's throat tightened at the words. This wasn't home. This was sanctuary and prison wrapped in luxury. The grand foyer alone spoke of wealth measured in billions, not millions. Italian marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers. Original artwork graced walls designed to withstand assault. Everything beautiful, everything fortified. A woman in a crisp suit appeared, tablet in hand. "Ms. Vance, I'm Marina, the house manager. Your rooms are prepared, and I've arranged for a complete wardrobe based on your previous sizes. Would you like to freshen up before dinner?" The normalcy of the question felt surreal after the day's revelations. Alara nodded, following Marina up a sweeping staircase while trying to memorize the layout. 2 guards shadowed them at a discreet distance. Her rooms turned out to be an entire wing of the 2nd floor. A sitting room opened to a bedroom larger than her old apartment, with a bathroom that belonged in a luxury spa. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of manicured grounds and distant mountains, all behind hurricane-proof glass. "Everything has been stocked for your comfort," Marina explained, demonstrating the security panel and communication system. "Mr. Moretti requested you have whatever you need." Everything except freedom, Alara thought. But she thanked Marina politely and took advantage of the massive shower, letting hot water sluice away hospital antiseptic and lingering shock. The provided clothes fit perfectly. Designer pieces in her preferred styles. Even her preferred shampoo waited in the shower. The attention to detail was both thoughtful and unsettling. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could seat 30 but had been set intimately for 2. Nikolai rose when she entered, pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy. He'd changed into a charcoal suit that emphasized his dangerous grace. Armed guards stood stationed at every entrance. "The security might seem excessive," he said, noting her glance at the men. "But it's necessary until we neutralize the immediate threat." "You mean my family?" Alara kept her voice steady as servers presented the first course. "Yes. They'll move quickly now that the crash failed. We need to be faster." The soup was a delicate butternut squash bisque that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Alara took a careful spoonful. "And how exactly do you plan to be faster?" "By using every resource at my disposal." Nikolai's tone was matter of fact. "Your family's power comes from appearing legitimate while operating in shadows. I don't have that constraint." "Because you're comfortable with violence?" She met his eyes directly. "With being the monster they whisper about?" "I'm comfortable with necessity." He set down his spoon. "Violence is a tool, nothing more. I don't take pleasure in it, but I won't hesitate when required." "And how often is it required in your world?" "More often than in yours, less often than you might think." His gaze remained steady. "I have other methods of handling problems. Violence is inefficient, bad for business." The main course arrived, perfectly seared duck breast with seasonal vegetables. Alara cut into the meat with precise movements. "And what am of I in your business calculations? An asset to protect? A liability to manage?" "You're my wife." The simple statement carried weight. "Everything else is secondary." "A wife who doesn't remember marrying you? Who has no memory of our relationship?" She set down her fork. "How does that factor into your equations?" "It means I protect you while you decide what you want." Nikolai's voice softened fractionally. "You're not a prisoner here, Alara. You're protected, not owned. But I won't risk your life by letting you leave until the threat is contained." "So I'm free within these walls? How generous!" The sarcasm was sharp. "Would you prefer I left you to your family's mercy?" His question was gentle but pointed. They've already moved to isolate you completely. He gestured to a tablet beside his plate. Alara picked it up, her hand steady despite the surge of anger as she read. All her accounts had been frozen for suspicious activity. Her apartment lease had been terminated for breach of contract. And there, on a major news site's pre-publication queue, waited her obituary. A tragic accident, a beloved daughter lost too soon, family requesting privacy in their time of grief. They're erasing me, she said softly, making sure I have nowhere to go, no resources to access. Even if I survived the crash, I'd be trapped. Yes, Nikolai's expression hardened. They planned thoroughly, but so did I. The servers cleared their plates in synchronized movements, replacing them with some elaborate dessert Alara couldn't focus on. Her mind was racing through implications, counting assets, mapping possibilities. My evidence, she said finally. Everything I gathered against them. It's in a secured server they can't access. I know, it's already been copied and relocated. At her sharp look, he added, I've had people watching over you for years, Alara. Did you think I wouldn't notice your investigation? She pushed away the untouched dessert. All this time, you were there in the background, watching me build a case against my own family while knowing what they'd done to us. I was making sure you stayed alive to finish it. His voice carried an edge of steel. They killed 3 people who helped with your initial investigation. I couldn't risk them discovering you were gathering evidence again. The weight of those deaths settled in her chest. More lives destroyed by her family's corruption. And now, what happens to all that evidence? Now we use it. Nikolai stood, offering his hand. Come with me. There's something you need to see. Alara hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His palm was warm, calloused in places that spoke of weapons training. He led her to his study, another fortress disguised as luxury, with wood-paneled walls that probably concealed enough weapons to supply a small army. A massive screen dominated one wall, currently displaying a complex network of connections and relationships. Alara recognized names from her own investigation, now linked to dozens more she'd never uncovered. This is everything, Nikolai explained. Your evidence combined with mine, every illegal deal, every bribed official, every shell company and hidden account, enough to destroy your family's empire completely. And build yours higher? She challenged. No. His denial was immediate. This isn't about expanding territory. This is about justice, and keeping you alive to see it done. Alara studied the display, seeing years of work merged with resources she'd never had access to. Everything she'd discovered, everything she'd suspected, laid bare in devastating detail. And at the center, a blank space where her own name should have been. Erased just like her memories, her marriage, her very existence. They're going to announce my death tomorrow, she said, reading the timestamp on the pre-written obituary. Once that happens, legally proving I'm alive becomes much harder. Yes. Nikolai moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. Which is why we need to move first. The question is, are you ready for what that means? Alara looked at the evidence of her family's crimes, at the guards standing ready to defend her, at this dangerous man who called her wife. Everything familiar had become threat. Every safety had become cage. There was only forward now through whatever darkness waited. Show me what you have planned, she said. Morning light streamed through bulletproof glass as Alara followed Nikolai into what he called the operations room. The space was a stark contrast to the mansion's old-world luxury. Sleek monitors covered the walls, displaying surveillance feeds, financial data, and news tickers. Men and women in tactical gear moved between workstations with military precision. Your family's been busy, Nikolai said, gesturing to a central screen. Ilara's breath caught. The feed showed the main hall of her family's estate, where her father hosted what appeared to be a somber gathering. Black dresses, carefully dabbed eyes, practiced grief on display. Her mother accepted condolences with the tissue pressed to perfectly made-up eyes. Her younger brother, Marcus, stood stoically by the fireplace, already wearing their father's signet ring. They're not even waiting 24 hours, she whispered, rage building in her chest. They can't afford to. Nikolai typed commands, bringing up financial projections. Your death triggers multiple inheritance clauses. The longer they wait, the more questions might arise. Another screen showed her Uncle Thomas in his law office, drafting documents with efficient ruthlessness. The timestamp was live. He's filing to have me declared legally dead, Alara realized, stepping closer to read the paperwork. expedited due to special circumstances. Your family's influence means it could be approved within 48 hours. Nikolai's voice carried careful neutrality. They're moving faster than anticipated. Alara laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Of course they are. Can't risk their perfect plan falling apart. She turned to face him. Show me everything. Nikolai studied her for a moment, then nodded to his team. They filed out silently, leaving them alone with the wall of evidence. He began pulling up files, offshore accounts, shell companies, proof of bribes reaching deep into law enforcement and government. The corruption goes back decades, Vowed, he explained. Your grandfather built the framework, your father expanded it, and your uncle Thomas handles the legal manipulation that keeps it hidden. I know. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Nikolai went still. What do you mean, you know? Alara met his gaze steadily. I've been gathering evidence for years, following money trails, documenting meetings, collecting proof of their illegal operations. She moved to a keyboard, fingers flying, as she accessed a hidden server. They trained me too well in financial analysis. Did they really think I wouldn't notice the patterns? Documents filled the screens, transaction records, surveillance photos, recorded conversations, years of careful investigation, all meticulously organized. This is... Nikolai trailed off, scanning the data with increasing intensity. Incomplete, Alara finished. I had limited access, no real power to act. But I knew someday they'd turn on me. I needed insurance. You've been preparing for war while playing the perfect daughter. There was something like admiration in his voice. How long? Since I was 16. Found proof they'd arranged my best friend's father's accident after he threatened to expose their smuggling operation. Her hands clenched. I learned to smile at family dinners while downloading files at night. Nikolai moved closer, his presence solid and warm behind her. Show me. For the next hour, Alara laid out her evidence, explaining connections and patterns. Nikolai listened intently, asking precise questions that revealed his own deep understanding of her family's operations. Their heads bent together over keyboards, building a fuller picture as their separate investigations merged. Here, she pointed to a series of transactions, monthly payments to offshore accounts linked to 3 judges, and these shell companies, they're funneling money to at least 12 police captains. The same ones who'd handle any investigation into your crash, Nikolai confirmed. They've bought themselves complete coverage. Almost complete. Alara straightened, turning to face him. But they didn't count on you. No. His eyes held hers. They didn't count on either of us. The air between them shifted, charged with something beyond revenge or alliance. Nikolai stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm not offering just protection, Alara, he said quietly. I'm offering partnership, equal power, equal control. We take them down together. Her heart pounded. This wasn't the safe harbor of a protector or the cage of a possessive savior. This was an invitation to rule. Why? She challenged. You clearly have the resources to destroy them yourself. Why share power? Because you've earned it. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek. Because I've watched you fight alone for years, gathering weapons in silence. Because you deserve to be the one who brings them down. The touch was electric, sending sparks through her body. Alara knew she should pull away, maintain distance and clarity. Instead, she leaned into his palm. And us, she whispered. This marriage we don't remember? We build something new. His other hand settled on her waist, steady and warm. Something real. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did, drawn together like magnets finally released. His lips met hers with restrained heat, testing, asking. Alara answered by pressing closer, one hand fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, raw and hungry, yet carefully controlled. Nikolai's hand stayed gentle, even as his mouth claimed hers with increasing intensity. Alara felt the power in him, the violence he kept leashed, and instead of fear, she felt only answering fire. A sharp knock shattered the moment. They broke apart, both breathing hard, as one of Nikolai's men entered with tablet in hand. Sir, Thomas Vance just filed the death declaration paperwork, he reported. Judge Carlton has agreed to expedite. Hearing is set for 48 hours from now. Alara's uncle's face filled one of the screens, his satisfied smile visible as he left the courthouse. She could almost hear the final nails being hammered into her coffin. Well, she said, voice steady despite her racing pulse. I guess we better move faster than they expect. Nikolai's answering smile was all predator. Together? She thought of her family celebrating her death, of years spent gathering evidence in secret, of this dangerous man offering her real partnership instead of mere protection. Together, she agreed. The operations room hummed with activity as Nikolai's team returned, screens filling with data as they began coordinating their response. Alara took her place beside him at the command station, noting how naturally his people included her in their reports and questions. Her family thought they were burying her. Instead, they'd given her the freedom to finally strike back. With Nikolai's resources and her intimate knowledge of their operations, she could do more than just expose their crimes. She could dismantle their entire empire. The kiss still burned on her lips, a promise of passion carefully, banked until there was time to explore it properly. But for now, there was work to do. They had 48 hours to stop her legal death and launch their counterattack. Alara's fingers flew across the keyboard, transforming financial data into weapons. The operations room thrummed with focused energy as Nikolai's team executed their coordinated assault on her family's empire. Not with bullets, not yet, but with information. Transfer records from the Singapore account, she called out, eyes locked on her screen. Cross-reference them with the shell companies we identified. Screens filled with cascading numbers, each transaction a thread in the web her family had woven. Alara felt more alive than she had in years, finally using her knowledge to strike back instead of just surviving. Got it, she announced, highlighting a series of transfers. They're routing the judge's bribes through a children's charity. Clever, but sloppy. The amounts match exactly. Nikolai appeared behind her, his presence solid and warm. Good work? Release it to the financial authorities? Not yet. Alara shook her head. Let's wait until we have the full picture. Hit them with everything at once. He squeezed her shoulder in approval, the touch lingering. Even focused on revenge, she couldn't ignore how her body responded to his proximity. Hours passed in a blur of data and strategy. Alara lost track of time until a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. Two of Nikolai's men dragged in a struggling figure, a man in an expensive suit, face bloody from what was clearly not his first beating of the night. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Nikolai straightened. Gone was the man who had touched her with such care. In his place stood someone else entirely. Someone who made the armed guards look gentle in comparison. Marcus DeLuca, Nikolai's voice was terrifyingly soft. You've been busy. The man spat blood. Go to hell, Moretti. After you. Nikolai nodded to his men, who forced DeLuca into a chair. You were seen at the Blue Harbor Casino last night, making phone calls, sharing information about my wife. Alara's breath caught. This was about her. I don't know what you're talking about, DeLuca growled, but his eyes flickered to Alara and away. Nikolai moved with sudden, brutal speed. His hand locked around DeLuca's throat, fingers pressing into specific points that made the man gasp in agony. Let's try again, Nikolai suggested pleasantly. Who contacted you about her location? No one, I swear! His words cut off in a choked scream as Nikolai's grip tightened. Your phone records say otherwise. 3 calls to a blocked number. $20,000 deposited in your account this morning. Nikolai's free hand produced a knife, the blade catching the light. Last chance. Alara should have been horrified. She should have looked away. Instead, she found herself moving closer, drawn by the controlled power radiating from Nikolai. DeLuca's eyes darted between them, calculation replacing fear. The bitch is worth 10 times that. Her family. He never finished the sentence. Nikolai's knife flashed once, opening DeLuca's throat in a precise arc. Blood sprayed, but not a drop touched Nikolai's immaculate suit. Clean this up, he ordered, and his men immediately moved to remove the body. The entire execution had taken less than 5 minutes. Clinical, efficient, terrifying. Alara stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had known Nikolai was dangerous, had seen glimpses of the violence he commanded. But witnessing it firsthand was different. This was the reality of his world, of the man she was choosing to align herself with. Alara? His voice was gentle now. The killer vanished behind concern. He made no move to touch her, giving her space to process. I'm fine, she said automatically, then corrected herself. No, that's not true. I'm processing. Do you want to leave the room? She shook her head. No, I need to understand this part of you too. His eyes searched her face. What you saw. That's who I am. What I do to protect what's mine. And I'm yours? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Yes. No hesitation, no artifice. but not as property, as partner. The distinction mattered. She thought of DeLuca's last words, the casual contempt in his voice. Her family saw her as a possession to be eliminated. Nikolai saw her as an equal to be protected. I should be more disturbed by this, she admitted. Perhaps. He finally stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her face. Or perhaps you understand necessity. She did. God help her, she did. The same calculation that had driven her to gather evidence for years told her that DeLuca's death was inevitable and necessary. He would have sold her location again to someone else who wanted her dead. Nikolai's thumb stroked her cheek, impossibly gentle for hands that had dealt death moments ago. Go rest. It's been a long day. Will you check on me later? The question surprised them both. His eyes darkened. If you wish. Hours later, showered and changed, Alara paced her luxurious suite. Every shadow seemed to hold memory of violence. Every silence echoed with DeLuca's final gurgle. Yet when a knock came at her door, she felt no fear. Come in. Nikolai entered, still in his suit but with the jacket removed. He had showered too. She could smell his soap, clean and masculine. How are you? He asked, keeping his distance. Struggling to reconcile things, she admitted. The man who kills without hesitation, the man who touches me like I'm precious, they're both you. Yes. No excuses, no justification. I should be running from you. Probably. She moved closer, drawn by his honesty as much as his presence. Instead, I'm wondering what it says about me that I want you here. His breath caught. Alara. Not for protection. She needed him to understand this. Not because I'm afraid to be alone, but because when you touch me, I feel more alive than I have in years. Nikolai remained perfectly still as she approached, letting her set the pace. Only his eyes betrayed his intensity, tracking her every movement. Stay, she whispered, close enough now to feel his heat. Stay with me tonight. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to retreat and trace the line of her jaw. Are you sure? After what you saw? I saw you eliminate a threat to me, efficiently, without pleasure or cruelty, just necessity. Her fingers found the buttons of his shirt. I saw you protect me, and yes, it was violent. But it was also... She searched for the right word. Also? His voice was rough. Compelling. She met his gaze directly. Knowing you would kill to keep me safe, knowing you're lethal to everyone except me, it should terrify me. Instead... His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. Instead? Instead, I want to know how those deadly hands feel on my skin. I want to experience every side of you. She pressed against him, feeling the coiled strength in his body. Stay. Nikolai's control visibly frayed. Last chance to change your mind. Alara answered by pulling him down into a kiss. His response was immediate and overwhelming, mouth claiming hers with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. But his hands remained gentle as they lifted her, carrying her to the bed as if she were something precious. The contrast struck her again. Killer's hands treating her with such care, violence transformed to tenderness. She arched into his touch, wanting more, wanting all of him. You're sure? He asked one final time, hovering above her. I'm sure, she whispered. Show me who you really are. His kiss was her answer, and Alara surrendered to the paradox of him. The man who killed to protect her, the predator who touched her like she was made of glass, the stranger who felt like home. Dawn painted golden streaks across the sheets when Alara woke, aware of Nikolai's warmth beside her. Last night had been tender exploration. This morning need burned hotter. She traced the scars on his chest, feeling muscle tense beneath her touch. His eyes opened, instantly alert, softening when they met hers. Good morning, she whispered, emboldened by the hunger in his gaze. His hand caught hers, bringing it to his lips. Are you sore? No. She shifted closer. But I want to be. A growl rumbled in his chest. Alara. His grip tightened. I need to hear you say it. I want you. She pressed against him. All of you. No holding back. I will never force you, he promised, rolling her beneath him. Everything we do is your choice. Then I choose this. She pulled him down into a burning kiss. What followed was raw passion unleashed, his control precisely measured even in abandon. He worshipped her body with mouth and hands, drawing out pleasure until she begged. When he finally claimed her, it was with an intensity that bordered on reverence. After, wrapped in tangled sheets, Alara traced patterns on his chest. "We need to talk strategy." "Now!" Amusement colored his voice. "Yes, now." She propped herself up. "I want to lead the revenge plan." He studied her, expression unreadable. "What did you have in mind?" "Public exposure instead of quiet elimination." Her voice hardened. "I want them to lose everything. Reputation, power, freedom. I want them to watch their empire crumble." "More painful than death," Nikolai observed. "More dangerous, too." "I've spent years gathering evidence." Alara sat up fully, sheets pooling at her waist. "Shell companies, bribes, trafficking routes, everything, but I needed power to use it. And now you have it." Pride and approval flickered in his eyes. "We have it," she corrected. "Your resources, my information, we can destroy them completely." Nikolai sat up beside her, all business, despite their state of undress. "Walk me through it." For the next hour, they planned. Alara laid out documented money trails, corrupt judges, and criminal enterprises. Nikolai added intelligence from his networks, filling gaps in her knowledge. By noon, they moved to his operations room. Alara, dressed in borrowed clothes that cost more than her old monthly salary, directed his team with growing confidence. "Release the judge's records first," she ordered. "Then the shipping manifests, space them out. Let each revelation build on the last." Nikolai watched her work, satisfaction evident in his stance. She was becoming what her family never expected, a leader, a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. The first leaks hit social media by 2 o'clock. Anonymous sources questioned financial irregularities. Journalists received mysterious tips about judicial misconduct. Trading patterns raised regulatory eyebrows. "Your uncle's trying to damage control," Nikolai reported, showing her intercepted messages. "He's calling in favors." "Let him waste them." Alara smiled coldly. "We have more ammunition than he has friends." By late afternoon, major news outlets picked up the story. Speculation grew about corruption in her family's empire. The same relatives who celebrated her death now scrambled to contain the damage. Alara watched it unfold on multiple screens, satisfaction coursing through her veins. She felt Nikolai's presence behind her, solid and supporting. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. "No." She leaned back against him. "I'm not their victim anymore. I'm their nightmare." His arms wrapped around her waist. "Yes, you are." "Does it bother you?" She turned to face him. "That I can be this ruthless?" "It makes me want you more." His kiss was possessive. "You're magnificent when you're dangerous." The monitors continued streaming coverage, stock prices dropping, reporters asking questions, her family's carefully crafted image beginning to crack. But Alara barely noticed, lost in Nikolai's touch and the intoxicating feeling of power. She had spent years pretending to be docile, hiding her true nature. Now, with Nikolai's empire at her disposal and his strength at her back, she could finally be herself. Brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely lethal to those who had wronged her. The media murmurs were just beginning, but Alara already felt the shift in herself. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was hunting. The evening sky darkened outside Nikolai's estate as Alara scrolled through her phone, watching their carefully orchestrated plan unravel. Breaking news alerts flooded her screen, each one more devastating than the last. Breaking! Evidence suggests Moretti crime family behind Vance heiress crash. Exclusive! Inside the forced marriage of Alara Vance. Sources reveal how Nikolai Moretti manipulated vulnerable heiress. Her hands trembled as she opened article after article. Doctored photos showed her looking frightened beside Nikolai at charity events she didn't remember attending. Manufactured witnesses described suspicious meetings between Nikolai and her car mechanic weeks before the crash. Timeline inconsistencies painted a picture of elaborate manipulation. "They're good," she muttered, recognizing her family's tactics. They weren't just denying the accusations, they were rewriting the entire narrative. Voices drifted from the hallway. 2 guards, speaking in low tones. "Public's eating it up," one said. "Social media is calling for investigations into Moretti, not the Vances." "Boss won't like that." "Yeah, well, hard to fight a story this clean. Makes him look like the villain." Alara's throat tightened. She'd seen her family destroy people this way before, twisting truth until even facts seemed suspicious. Now they were doing it to Nikolai, and by extension to her judgment. Doubt crept in like poison. She trusted her memories, but they felt fragile against the weight of manufactured evidence. The marriage certificate, the ring scar. Could those have been fabricated too? She found Nikolai in his office, studying multiple screens of data. He looked up as she entered, expression shifting as he read her face. "You've seen the news," he said, not a question. "I need to know." Her voice cracked. "Did you orchestrate the crash?" Instead of defending himself, Nikolai stood and walked to his desk. He typed a series of commands, and suddenly every screen in the room lit up with files. "Full access," he said, stepping back. "Financial records, surveillance footage, communication logs, everything from the past 5 years. Look for yourself." The simple action, offering proof instead of promises, steadied her. This wasn't the response of a manipulator, but before she could begin searching, alarms blared through the estate. "Fire in the East Wing!" A guard burst in. "We need to evacuate." Nikolai's posture changed instantly. "Protocol 3, he barked into his phone. "Secure the—" An explosion rocked the building, cutting him off. Smoke filled the hallways as guards shouted coordinates. "Stay close," Nikolai ordered, pulling her toward the door. But another blast separated them, debris raining down between their outstretched hands. "Nikolai!" Alara screamed through the chaos. "This way, Ms. Vance!" Unknown hands grabbed her arms. "We're getting you out!" She fought against their grip. "No, I need to find— He's the one who did this!" one man shouted, dragging her toward a side exit. "Your family sent us. We've been tracking his manipulation for months." "Let me go!" But they were stronger, moving with military precision. Through smoke and confusion, she caught a final glimpse of Nikolai fighting through the debris toward her. Then something struck her head, and darkness swallowed everything. Her last conscious thought was realizing how perfectly her family had played them both. They hadn't just attacked the narrative, they'd used it as cover for a physical assault. And now, in the chaos of emergency protocols and public suspicion, who would believe she'd been kidnapped rather than rescued? The world faded to black as her captors carried her into the night, leaving behind the burning estate and the man she'd just begun to trust. Her family had turned their love story into a nightmare, and she couldn't tell which was worse, the physical abduction or the seed of doubt they'd planted about everything she thought she knew. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, she heard one of her rescuers make a phone call. "Target secured, proceeding to extraction point." She tried to fight the encroaching darkness, to memorize voices and movements, but the blow to her head was too strong. As awareness slipped away completely, Alara's last sensation was the cold night air against her skin, so different from the warmth of Nikolai's protection she'd grown accustomed to. The carefully constructed safety of her new world had shattered in a single evening, leaving her at the mercy of those who claimed to be saviors, but moved like trained killers. Her family hadn't just attacked. They'd orchestrated a perfect storm of psychological warfare and physical violence, using public opinion as a smokescreen for abduction, and she was powerless to stop it. Consciousness returned slowly to Alara, her head throbbing as her eyes adjusted to dim lighting. She found herself zip-tied to a leather armchair in what appeared to be her Uncle Marcus's private study. The familiar scent of his cigars filled the air. "Finally awake!" Her uncle's smooth voice came from behind her. "We were starting to worry." He stepped into view, immaculate in his tailored suit. Outside the window, dense forest stretched for miles. She recognized the location, their family's remote hunting estate. "The inheritance was never meant for you," Marcus explained, pouring himself a drink. "Your father's will had specific conditions. Your death would have distributed the assets more appropriately." Alara's mind raced, processing each word while scanning the room. A laptop sat open on the desk, security feeds visible. "We can make this easy," Marcus continued. "Denounce Moretti publicly, claim he manipulated you. Your inheritance will be restored, and this unpleasantness ends." Through the partially open door, she caught fragments of guard conversations. "Moretti refused the deal. Wouldn't trade her. Killed 3 of our men." Her chest tightened. Nikolai had chosen her over power. The realization strengthened her resolve. While Marcus monologued about family loyalty, Alara worked her hands free, using an old trick she'd learned from countless society events wearing tight bracelets. The moment he turned to refill his drink, she lunged for the laptop. 3 clicks. That's all she needed. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the hidden accounts she'd discovered years ago while playing the obedient niece. The pre-dawn air bit at Alara's skin as she limped through back alleys, her stolen laptop clutched against her chest. Her ribs ached from the escape, but determination drove her forward. Finding an internet cafe just opening its doors, she slipped inside and got to work. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading files in encrypted bursts. Each release was timed, set to detonate like digital bombs across the morning hours. She left subtle markers in the data, patterns only Nikolai would recognize from their shared analysis sessions. Across the city, Nikolai's revenge blazed like wildfire. Reports flooded in of raids on her family's properties, assets frozen within hours, and key conspirators found dead in their beds. He was burning her family's empire to ash while hunting for her. By nightfall, Alara followed their pre-arranged protocol, making her way to a nondescript apartment building. The moment she entered the safe house, Nikolai was there. His eyes blazed with barely contained emotion as he crossed the room in 2 strides. "Never again," he growled, pulling her close. Anger and relief warred in his touch. Alara pressed herself against him, fingers gripping his shirt. "I chose this. I chose you." Their kiss was brutal, desperate, acclaiming on both sides. When they finally broke apart, strategy replaced passion. Together they bent over laptops and papers, plotting the final dismantling of her family's power. Partner to partner, equal to equal, sunrise painted the city blood red as justice descended. Alara watched from Nikolai's command center as her carefully compiled evidence ignited a firestorm across international media. Arrest warrants poured in from Interpol and federal agencies worldwide, her family's crimes laid bare for all to see. "They're running," Nikolai said, his voice cold as he tracked multiple radar signatures leaving the country. "Not for long." One by one, reports came in. Her cousin caught at a private airfield. Her aunt intercepted at the Canadian border. Each capture felt like a weight lifting from Alara's shoulders. When they cornered her uncle in his panic room, Alara insisted on being there. Nikolai's men breached the steel door to find him cowering behind his desk. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Alara told him as federal agents dragged him away in handcuffs. His empire was ashes, his reputation destroyed. That night, in their private quarters, Nikolai approached her differently. Gone was the protective warrior, the ruthless crime lord. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "You've proven yourself beyond any doubt," he said softly. "I offer you everything I am, not as your protector, but as your equal." Alara's heart swelled. She had entered his world as a victim seeking shelter. Now she stood as a force in her own right, choosing this man, this life, this power. She pulled him up to meet her kiss. "Everything," she whispered against his lips. "I accept everything." 3 weeks after the arrests, Alara stood at the podium of a press conference, her head held high. Camera flashes illuminated her determined expression as she announced her official return from the dead. The reporters hung on every word as she detailed the reinstated marriage license and her reclaimed inheritance. Behind closed doors, she threw herself into restructuring the legitimate facades of their empire. Corporate meetings filled her mornings, while afternoons were spent modernizing operations. She moved through boardrooms like she was born to command them, her intelligence and ruthlessness earning respect from even Nikolai's most hardened captains. Meanwhile, Nikolai worked in darkness, eliminating loose ends and remnants of her family's network. Each night he returned to her, sometimes with blood still on his cuffs, but always with that same intense devotion in his eyes. On this particular evening, they stood together on their penthouse balcony. The city sparkled below them like a blanket of stars, a kingdom built on shadow and steel. Alara leaned back against Nikolai's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. "They wanted to erase me," she mused, watching lights flicker in distant windows. "Instead, they created something they can't touch." Nikolai's grip tightened possessively. "They forged you in fire. Now you rule it." She turned in his arms, studying the dangerous man who had become her sanctuary. "How long?" "Forever." His voice held no gentleness, only absolute certainty. "You're mine until the world burns." Alara smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time. Here, in this precarious balance of power and passion, violence and protection, she had found her home. In his arms, she was finally completely free. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.